What kind of man do you want to become? Do you want to continue in that line of dysfunction where you're passing on the dysfunction of alcoholism, of being violent, of being suppressed emotionally? There's another study that by Diaz and Ressler in 2014 at Emory University where they found that mice trained to fear a specific smell had offspring and even grandchildren who showed heightened fear responses to the same smell, despite never being exposed to it themselves. The mechanism of that is that it's called the epigenetic modification, specifically in the sperm, suggests trauma can alter gene expression without changing the DNA sequence. Similarly, also about the genocide that happened in Rwanda, and also a study that was done about adverse childhood experiences by the CDC, and then the adverse childhood finding by the Center for Disease says this landmark study found that childhood trauma, abuse, neglect, household dysfunction is strongly associated with long-term health problems, mental illnesses, substance abuse, and even early death. Again, it's important to know, even within the lineage, what are you predisposed to in terms of trauma? And that's why the question then becomes, what kind of man do you want to become? Do you want to continue in that line of dysfunction where you're passing on the dysfunction of alcoholism, of being violent, of being suppressed emotionally, of not having good relationships? Or do you want to change that? And then if you want to change that, then how do you go about doing that? And in terms of the biblical and theological parallels, it says the following in Exodus 20 verse 5, the sins of the fathers are visited upon the children. There's this idea that the sins of the fathers, trauma of the fathers, is passed down up to the fourth generation. But it also says that, but showing mercy to 1,000 generations to those who love me, which means that there's a possibility then to, through spiritual exercise and through belief and through the relationship with God, that those generational traumas, those sins that have been passed down, those experiences that you would have because of where you come from, they can be restored. And we've seen this happen. I know even with myself, I grew up without the presence of my father, without the presence of my mother. I grew up in this tremendous amount of dysfunction where there was no psychological safety for me, a lot of not belonging, a lot of confusion and chaos. And yet, in my latter days, as I discovered more and more about who I am and who I don't want to be, and I started to put myself in spaces that spoke more life into the kind of man that I want to be, I am in a place where, as opposed to living and continuing a life of brokenness, I'm operating rather as somebody that brings healing, that brings restoration, that brings transformation, that helps others to grow even as I'm growing, and that helps others to thrive even as I'm thriving. And so then that tells us this very, very important part, that at the end of the day, regardless of what your genetic disposition is and your history is, your trauma is, and your environment is, what makes you a man is that there's a point where you decide what kind of man you're going to be. And that exercise requires that you examine your life thoroughly. And sometimes I found that it's helpful for me to not only examine my life through my own lens alone, but to have other trusted men and people around me that can help me to examine my life so that I can see a different perspective even about my own experiences. It was when I came to church, when I met pastors. It was when I came across other men who became my mentors, who became my coaches from different parts of the world, that I began to realize, oh, this is the kind of man that I want to be, seeing this in this man from another country, from another tribe, from another race, from another ethnic group that is different from mine. and deciding that that's what I want to take from them, and that's what I want to integrate into me in terms of the kind of person that I want to be. But it is not a clear-cut exercise of, well, my genetics are saying this, well, my history is saying that, well, my background is saying all of that. That ultimately the greatest power that you have as a man is your mind. And you have to make your identity in terms of who do I want to be as a man, a goal that you work towards, to find tools, to find resources, to find knowledge, to find experiences, to give yourself that level of awareness that can help you to become the kind of man that you want to be. Well, this is the first part of identity, the battle of identity as a man. We are going to be sharing the next part on the next episode. Once again, my name is Jabu Zwane. Thank you so much for tuning into Men of Change, where we are the men who are leading the change that we want to see in ourselves and the change that we want to see in society. Because together we can be able to build a healthy society, thrive in society, and be the men of change. Peace.